All right, welcome to Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Norris from Menlo Park PD. He has 32 years experience in law enforcement, and wellness is something that he is very passionate about. So I'm very excited to have him on today's episode. Welcome, Chief Norris. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Paige. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Of course. And, we talked offline. I'm really excited to talk to you. I know that wellness is a passion of yours. I first want to maybe give a little bit of background for anyone who doesn't know you. You've been in this job for 32 years. How did you get into law enforcement? What do those 32 years look like for you so far?
Well, I never thought that I was going to be a police officer as a career. Lots of people go through college, they do criminal justice and they're interested in this job. And although there is floating around out there a picture of me at about 5 years old wearing like a sheriff's star and holding a gun, which I think is really funny. Um, I was involved in baseball and I was involved in science through all of my growing up. And so by the time I was done with my college career, I had a pre-med sciences degree. I was playing minor league professional baseball, and I thought, well, I'm either going to end up as a doctor or I'm going to end up as a ball player. And neither of those things happened. After my baseball career, I realized I didn't want to go back to school for like 8 years and $750,000 of my life in medical school. And so I was looking for things that I could do to use my science degree, um, doing restaurant management and other things to kind of pay the bills. And my mom was looking for a job at the same time, ended up finding an advertisement for what they called a police service aide, which we call community service officers mostly nowadays, like non-sworn officers who assist police officers with their duties. But there was evidence technician expertise that was part of the education process. And she said, well, maybe that'll get you, a career in forensics or something, because I was still like, I had my degree in the sciences. And so ended up coming over to a police department. This was San Mateo Police Department in the mid 90s. Found that the scientific method and the way that we investigate crimes as police like were perfectly aligned with each other, and just found my passion in policing. And that was the beginning of it. As I started to go through my career, I realized that it wasn't as important for me or to me to learn as much as it was to share and to give it back. And so that started me on the track to field training and then supervision, then all the way up into leadership ranks. And so that's kind of how I got my start. And that's why, this wellness space is so intriguing to me. Everything is evidence-based, it's science-based, it's something that I can get behind. I have a lot of my educational background in physiology as a biology, psychology split degree, with an emphasis on how human beings function. And so for me, this is a space where I feel really comfortable gathering information and turning around and sharing that information. And so that's helped me to kind of get my eyes opened, coming from an era where it was really more old-fashioned style policing and moving into more progressive style policing, and with wellness being a component of that. It's a very comfortable space for me.
I always find it really fascinating how the trajectory of our lives tend to happen and how I feel like everything that we do prepares us for that next step. And sometimes it's without even knowing it. Like you come from a sports background, which means that wellness and fitness was something that you grew up with. Like that was ingrained in you because you
Right.
knew that you had to be physically and mentally fit to perform at a high level. You knew what teamwork and camaraderie was. You knew how to, you know, pick each other up from a team mentality perspective. And then you go to college, not at all thinking that you're going to be in law enforcement with this science degree. And now you have a deeper understanding of the physical, the mental, the scientific part of wellness. And then you get into your career, and now you're passionate about the wellness space and you have that preparation, but maybe didn't even realize that that's what you were doing throughout your life to prepare you for where you are now and the role that you're in now.
For sure. And really, that team aspect of it, teamwork is so important in this business. And it is very similar, at least I find, to baseball in the sense that in the sport of baseball, I call it a very individually oriented team sport, right? There are team goals, like you have to score enough runs to win. You have to hold the other team to less runs in order to win. But every individual has a very specialized action that they have to do. And sometimes you have to wait and it doesn't come to you right away. And then you have to execute perfectly in order for the team to win for your individual thing. And to me, that's just so like police patrol and being out on the street on your own without direct supervision, knowing that the next call that you go to, you have no idea what that stimulus is that's coming your way, and being expected to really execute on your duties in that moment in a very unique way that forwards the team goal of public safety or the team goal of good community relations. And so for me, like it's a very easy transition, going from that very team-oriented sport philosophy to working with a team, whether that's a patrol team or your entire department.
I love that you put it that way, that like individuality within the team and the greater mission. I don't think I've ever heard it explained that way, and it makes complete sense. When we were talking a little bit offline, and this wasn't even something I was expecting to talk to you about, but I think it's important to kind of know. We were talking about, the impact that we would like to have on the world, whether that's within your organization or outside of your organization, and the people that we want to help along the way. What do you think is something that you're most proud of throughout your career, whether that was in your current role or just within your full, career? What were you most proud of?
I focus a lot less on individual accomplishments that I've done and much more on the people that I've influenced and left behind who are now doing incredible work. And so I'll give you a really good example. So we talked about my time at San Mateo PD. I was there for 27 years. I left at the rank of a captain, having served as a captain and an interim chief. And I had several people that I had been working with and mentoring throughout the last several years of my career there for leadership ranks. And many of them, I did not get the chance to see them move up to that next level that I would have liked to, be able to see that while I was working there. But it provided an interesting, scientific process for me to leave that organization, have it be in the hands of a completely different leader, and have that leader identify and recognize all those people that I've been working with and elevate them to through promotion to new positions. And those are the things that I value the most is that I've been able to help people who really want to help the organization and leave that kind of legacy behind where they have the values and principles that are imbued within them, that will allow them to be successful, but also do the same and turn around and help the next generation behind them. So, those are the things that maybe drive me the most and fuel my passion the most, is that there are others who are picking up that ball.
This is, and I've said this so many times before, but this is my favorite part of working with law enforcement is that anytime I talk to someone in leadership and I say, hey, like, tell me about you. It's always like how you helped other people. It's always in service of other people, always. And I love that. I love that it's such a selfless profession where you're like, I really want other people to succeed. I want to help other people to be the best that they possibly can be. And I think that goes back to that team mentality, but it's also like the snowball effect. And I think that anyone who's listening should realize that like we all have that ability to positively impact someone else's life. And
Mhm.
it has to come from an authentic space. Like I think if you were to go out and be like, look at me, I'm helping people, like you did that because it was actually like what you wanted to do and that was what you were passionate about and you really truly wanted other people to elevate themselves.
Right.
But that's the snowball effect that happens. It's like you help someone and then they're going to remember how you helped them. And then they're going to want to be that type of person that helps other people. And then that's how we make that forward progress within wellness, within leadership. So I love that. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good connector to, I know we talked a little bit about organic growth in an organization, and I can talk a little bit about like how our wellness journey evolved here at my department, and how it had some organic legs to it that without that it would not be successful. So we were a department when I came in 2021. We were a department that had been through some iterations of wellness. We had a previous chief who was very big in the wellness space, and that chief had taken most, if not all, the department on a 3 day wellness retreat, offsite retreat that did not have the result that I think that was originally intended. And I think that had to do with it was not organic. It was led as an initiative coming from the top of the organization saying this is what we're going to do. And there were some people that weren't ready for that kind of change and somewhat turned their back on it. And so an early conversation that I had with an influential member of our department, who I knew was one of the folks who had, kind of stood up and said, I'm not doing this, in the previous wellness experience. We were talking about the level of stress in the job. And, since that particular wellness experience, that was before the pandemic. That was before the murder of George Floyd and all of the movement that really energized behind that. And we were talking about how stressful it is right now for people in the policing business, where here we were like in mid 2021. Everyone was still feeling the strain of communities asking them like, what are you doing about this, police department? How are you building trust in your community, and why aren't you as accountable as we would like you to be? And here are these officers who like feel very confident that they're professional police officers that are doing a great job, and all they're hearing is negative feedback.
Right.
And so I said, as part of the conversation, like I understand how much stress there is. I've been watching it as much as anyone else has, and I kind of halfway joked with him, and because I thought he was just gonna go off when I said this as like, yeah, that's ridiculous. I said, there's an app for that now, and I was talking about one of the apps that's out there that kind of aggregates all these wellness solutions. And he looked at me and he's like, an app would be really cool. And I'm like, that is not the response I thought I was going to get from this kind of like, this person is, very old school, very traditional in the business. And that really, it lit a light bulb for me saying like, there is a little bit of a green light here to try and find our way back to wellness space. And that really started our journey of trying to find a way organically, to grow it within the organization.
And I think to your point, I think it's important to meet people where they are. And like you said, maybe previous to the events in 2021, there wasn't that receptiveness, but things change. And, there was a lot of stress during that time. And I still think that there is still a little bit of residual since then. I think things changed a lot since then with like unrest and like perception and law enforcement from the, outside
Mhm.
community. But I think that if you meet people where they are and when they're open and receptive to it, then that's when you like go full speed into it because it's like, okay, like you said, we
Right.
have that green light, let's go. But maybe previous to that, the receptiveness wasn't there. And I think that we see that evolve over time. And typically it's going to be a little bit more reactive, right? It's going to be in a moment of like, okay, well, now we're under a lot of stress. What can we do
Right.
as far as
Right.
receptiveness is concerned? And or in individuals, what I see is usually it's like once there's an injury, then it's like, okay, like what can we do to alleviate the pain and then prevent any future injuries from happening. So I think that you're spot on with saying, okay, how can we organically do this in a way that people are going to respond to it?
Right. And that's exactly how things evolved with our peer support program as well. So we had two or three serious incidents that happened just back to back to back over the course of about a week or so. There was an officer who had a close friend that took his own life. There was another officer who had a close relative pass away under very tragic circumstances. And then another officer who also had a relative who had serious health issues and passed away. And so I remember meeting, in the hallway outside my office with our commanders at the time. And I said, okay, well, like we've got all this stuff going on. Like, what's our peer support program like here? Because I was still new and learning the organization. And where's what do we have in terms of chaplaincy? And I kind of got a little bit of well, we have a peer support program, but we don't really, we don't have a lot of people left who are still peer support people. And we have a chaplain, but we haven't really called on that chaplain in a long time. And so, the situation was ripe, right? The circumstances were ripe to say, like, let's start looking. And that's where I have to give a lot of credit to Danny O'Connor, was serving at the time as my executive assistant. We've now, broadened her position into like a management analyst position, who has taken on some of the inner workings and the infrastructure of a wellness program, for taking that ball, getting, running with that, getting a really good, supportive team of professionals that came in and helped us to stand our peer support program back up. Using a process called blind nomination, and I don't know if anybody's talked about that in your sessions before, but the blind nomination process is the clinician who is like works with police departments, comes in and talks at briefing and says, look, I'm going to pass out these 3x5 cards to everybody on the team here. I want you to write down the name of the person who is most trusted to you, who you feel like you can go to for anything, and collected those cards, and then used that as a foundation to come back and say, okay, chief, here are the 6 or 7 people who your department trusts,
Mhm.
that you should be utilizing as peer support. And here are 2 or 3 people in leadership ranks whose names come up often that could help to run this peer support team, and use that as kind of like a foundational information to jumpstart our peer support program. And we now have a really, thriving peer support program that is now already, I'm 4 years into this job here, but we're in our second round of bringing people on into the peer support program. And it's working really well. And, critical incident, sessions to talk about any impacts that have happened. Those are handled very quickly and efficiently, and we have a number of people who have that peer support credential who stand ready to serve, and we have people in leadership roles who are taking on responsibility, saying, "Yes, I know, like, I'm wearing stripes on my sleeve now. It's important. I need to help with organizing this peer support team." And so, I have to give a lot of credit to Danny for standing it up, to Sergeant Josh Russell, who's one of our sergeants on staff here, who's taken the responsibility of being kind of a lead person in the peer support program, for really taking that to the next level.
And I love that concept. I've actually never heard that. Maybe it's something that other organizations do, but I haven't heard it on this podcast with the blind nominations. I mean, I would imagine that it's important to have people in those peer support roles that are trusted. And I've heard a few times that, maybe some people volunteer because they like the gossip or whatever it is, and it's not necessarily someone that people want to go to. And so to me, that sounds counterproductive of the goal of peer support is to have people
Right.
in place that are trusted, that people want to go to talk to if and when they need those, that
And it
support.
provides this opportunity. Sometimes you'll get that proportion as well, like the people who are just they just want to hear the dirt, right? Or you'll get like crickets. You'll get nobody volunteering because nobody wants to step forward, and that happens a lot. Any organization that you're in, that happens a lot. But what this does is it allows a person who's an expert to reach out to that person and say, whether you realize this or not, you're very trusted in the organization, and we could use your help.
Right.
And we're helpers in this business, to have somebody outreach and say, hey, you'd be useful in this role, like that resonates.
Mhm.
And it becomes, a really organic way to develop people who are passionate about it.
I love that. And one of the things that you had said offline that I wanted to kind of circle back to was this idea of maintenance when it comes to wellness initiatives and how it takes effort to keep these things moving forward rather than just having something that sits there, collects dust, kind of checks a box. How important do you think that is to like have that continued maintenance or effort to make sure that these programs are thriving and not just there?
It's crucially important. Yeah, and again, it takes the entire village to accomplish that, right? Because you could have one person who's saying like, "Hey, I'm the wellness coordinator, and this is what we're doing, and let's go this direction." But unless you have people that are saying, "Yeah, that resonates with me, let's follow that," or talking to their buddy on the right or left at the briefing table, saying like, "Hey, this sounds really important. Like, let's give this a shot," or "Hey, there's this initiative like." Let's call up the guys on the other team and let's have a competition on that. That part is the part that I think is important. So it's how you light those fuses and how you kind of like set the tone for that. That's as important as the maintenance initiatives itself. So so we have a number of different ways that we do that here. We do wellness updates where Danny will come in with either somebody from peer support or somebody from our wellness coordinator to talk about other health related issues, or someone to talk about financial health, and do these briefing trainings that get everybody involved.
Mhm.
And those things are done in a team setting and purposefully in a team setting to say, hey, this is something we feel is important, so we're going to continue to bring it your way, but it comes in a sharing environment,
Right.
right? And then there are other ways that we can also kind of like keep it supported on the back end. And I know we've talked a little bit about my weekly emails, and so that's a way to inject a little bit. But I would love if we have a moment to talk about our wellness coordinator and how we have put that program together, because I think it's unique and I think it speaks to some of the smaller agencies that say to themselves, I don't know that we can do this with our limited team and our limited resources.
Please do. I would love that.
So I was approached by my partner chief in the next door agency. So Menlo Park is relatively small. We're about 35,000 population, so we have just under 50 sworn personnel, and we sit right next to two other small police departments. The town of Atherton, which only has about 7 or 8,000 population, and maybe 25 or so police officers, and East Palo Alto, which sits on the other side of us, and they have around 30 something police officers, and we're all kind of partnered because there's a fire district that covers all three cities, and so we're just natural partners. And East Palo Alto came to me and said, "Hey, I've got a guy who is willing to put together a grant to identify a full-time wellness coordinator that works for all three agencies, if all three agencies are willing to participate." And so instead of a 30 something or 40 something officer organization trying to find someone that can help them, we have, about 100 police officers that now we have a little bit more leverage, and we have some grant funding, and we were able to, through that grant funding, have one full-time coordinator that serves all three agencies. And so her name's Megan. She splits time between East Palo Alto and Atherton and Menlo Park, coming out and spending one-on-one time with the officers, anything that they need in the wellness space, from proper nutrition to going in the gym with them and helping them with exercises to doing blood work and analyses. And one of the things that I have told my team a couple times in our weekly emails when those uh, blood opportunities, the blood analysis opportunities come by, is I've had sit downs with my physician where we've gone over my blood work and I've gotten something out of it, but I have a science background and it's a little bit easier for me to keep track.
Mhm.
The folks at Wellness Solutions that help us with these blood analyses, like they take a significant amount of time and they walk through line by line what's important about your numbers and how that affects you and how that affects your daily life. And I've never seen anyone take that kind of time and do as detailed a dive into, how the chemistry affects your health as they do. And so I think we have a really good situation where we're able to share resources across three agencies. Even if we were paying for this on our own, it would not be as difficult a lift as it would be if we had to, do it individually as individual agencies, or we wouldn't get the amount of time, right? We'd get, maybe some kind of a part-time share or some very limited, or things would be a la carte, right? And have to be paid for. And so it's a super efficient way for us to gather together and do this. And we're looking to do some presentations coming up at some of the conferences to talk about this because we think it's important for small agencies.
And I think that it's also important to know that like most agencies are small across the country.
Right.
And one of the pieces of feedback I always get is the same. It's like, well, we don't have the funding or we're too small. Like we can't do that. And it's also in the context of peer support. Like that is brought up all the time of like, oh, well, we're really small. Like maybe it's an agency that has 10 people. It's like, well,
Mhm.
it's too close knit. And so there is value in remembering that you are not just a team within your organization, you are a team in law enforcement. And so, how can you expand that network and maybe do something that, like you said, partners with neighboring agencies, or maybe do countywide initiatives, like where everyone comes together and does like a countywide peer support or whatever that is. And then, to your point, maybe funding is something that's a challenge within the organization. So, how can you find grant funding for something like that? So, I love that because I think that a lot of times when you think that it's not possible, then you don't try. It's kind of like, nope, we can't do that,
That's right.
moving on. So having someone who's done that before, who's found great success in it, I think that's great, a great message to anyone out there who's, maybe struggling to build a wellness program or wanting to expand their wellness program.
And I think that sharing in between agencies is really important. When you have a big agency and you can stand up kind of, something that's more robust, that's one thing. But when you're a smaller agency and, San Mateo County is built that way. We have, a small size city agencies all up and down the length of it's San Francisco, basically San Francisco down to Santa Clara County, and we have such a great relationship in being able to share resources and share information and talk with one another. And the peer support groups all know each other. And we also recognize this, and we didn't even talk about this, but especially when you're a small agency, you have situations that could completely overwhelm your peer support program, right? If something happened that was a large scale event or something that required people to come in from off duty, and now you don't have, people on the other side of the work week or on the night shift versus the day shift, like everyone got their hands in the mix on some kind of large scale, high resource event. We would reach out to the agency next door because we already have that relationship to say, or reach out to the countywide peer support kind of group and say, like, we need more peer support than we have, or our best peer support folks are the ones who are involved in this, and we could really use some support. And to be able to share those efforts with each other, like it's crucial.
As you're saying that, I just was thinking back to like what you talked about in baseball. And I was thinking as like the individuality as being like the organization now, like kind of expanding that outlook of like, okay, each organization is operating independently, but then like how can you come together as a team when
Right.
you need it? So that's what was going through my mind. And I think that that is wildly important to realize that you do have support system outside of you and you can reach out. And even if it's just for ideas or like, hey, like what is working for you, and
Right.
snowballing those things because there's going to be other organizations out there who have done it and who have done it well. And so how can
Yep.
you reach out and you can, you don't have to reinvent the wheel all the time. Like maybe you do want to be progressive and you want to be innovative and think outside of the box and there's things that you do organizationally that are that way. But what are maybe some things that, other agencies are doing that are working really well? And then how are they doing it? And then how can you get ideas to do it for yourself?
Yeah, and we're really fortunate in this county because we have a really tight-knit group of police chiefs who the majority of us kind of grew up in the business in a countywide commanders group together as like the seconds in command or command staff members, elevated into the chief positions. We all know each other very well, and without hesitation can reach out and ask for help or ask for advice or provide some advice to agencies that sit right next to us. It's an important part of being connected at the top.
Yeah.
And it also, when agencies and the line level and the supervisor level see that the police chiefs are willing and able to work together, I think that helps everybody to be able to work together.
100%. There's one more thing I want to talk about on this subject, and then I kind of want to switch gears a little bit. But I want to talk because you have a really interesting perspective on wellness programming just in general, and you call it North Stars and Champions. Can you
Mhm.
explain a little bit about that concept?
Yeah, yeah, and that's that is really like an overall concept for me. Those things are really important. So what I have learned and found in my career is that if you provide scripts to people and say, if this, then that. I think you really limit yourself in our business because nothing is ever exactly like the script, right? And so finding principles and values that you can set your sights on, like those are the North Stars. And so if I can find, principles that are important, like we want you to feel mentally well. We want you to feel like you have a place to put your stress. Or we want you to be, physically well. We want you to have some good understanding of what's healthy versus unhealthy to do with your system and what you put into your body, so that you can be super functional when you're in this job. Like those are very, broad topics, right? And the idea is to take some of those broad North Stars and say, like, these are the priorities that we're setting for you, and to bring that to, the people who are sitting at the briefing table and find ways to make that resonate so that that individual, that officer who may be an informal leader in the organization is saying like, yeah, that makes sense to me. And I can help with that because I'm doing some things in my experience or in my life that I think I can use as an example. It allows me to do some leadership even at my level in the organization and help somebody. And it also allows me to turn to the person to the right and turn to the person to the left at the briefing table and say, hey, this makes sense to me. Um, how can I help, or how can we do this together, or how can we, turn this into a friendly competition, to make us better. And the only way that you can make progress in an organization in a way that is sustainable, is to develop champions in the organization who will promote those values and bring that forward so that they're sharing it in a way that feels, organic, or that it feels real to them. And that's very different from, doing what I call like write a memo, change the world, which, a lot of leadership will do that. They'll just say, well, I'm just going to put down a protocol and everybody's going to follow it. Or I'm going to send out an email and I'm just going to, and this is an order from the top. So everybody's got to do it. Um, you will not find, swifter rebellion in an organization if you without thinking about the impacts and thinking about who will absorb this and what they will say about it than doing something kind of with blinders on. So it's really important to gather some support and appreciation for what's going on at the line level. Make it the idea of the people who are working in the organization, and then you can champion that as well as a leader in the organization and say, hey, I saw Officer so and so that was doing this, or hey, Sergeant so and so is organizing the law enforcement torch run, or hey, the commander just sent something out about we're doing some kind of a walk, a 5K walk run for charity. Like, and how can we get everybody involved? And you can be supportive of that, and you can participate in that as a leader, and you can be, kind of that participative or servant leader in that way. But the ideas and the passion, it has to come from the body of the organization.
I love that. Excuse me. And I've never heard write a memo change the world. I think that's hilarious. But it sounds to me like the top is fully passionate and supportive of wellness. And that's really important. It's like at the very top, like you as the chief, you are like, yes, like I am supportive. I promote this. This is something I find to be incredibly valuable. I want you to feel
Mhm.
physically, mentally well. I want you to have the resources that you need to thrive. But you're empowering everyone within your organization to do those things and to create that we said this before, kind of that snowball effect and that culture within themselves in a way that like they receive it. So it's almost like
Right.
it's like their idea, and they're like, yes, like I'm gonna run with this because I'm passionate about it, or someone I respect is doing this, and so I want to do that too.
Right. There's a lot in terms of like when I talk about like developing principles and values, like those aren't original. Those aren't something that like I'm thunking it all up myself, right? These are things that are fairly universal. That you will have a conversation with someone and find that they want this as much as you think it is important. And so, we do the same thing in community policing, right? If I was part of an initiative where we were dealing with traffic, and I said, well, why don't we just go do listening sessions in the community, and we'll go neighborhood by neighborhood, and we're going to ask them, like, what are your top 10 traffic issues? Because you know what, every single neighborhood in the community will have the same top two or three traffic issues.
Mm,
But if we're asking them and they're giving them to us, it's much different than us saying, we've decided that these are our top three traffic issues. Now we're saying, you have given us your top three issues and we can work on those. And now we're working for you instead of working to you.
yeah.
And it's really important. And that is easily translated across, any of a number of different concepts, whether it's this business or another business. If you know that there are principles and there are priorities that are everybody is thinking about, why aren't we making those generated by the level that finds it most important, or who for whom it is most important? And then there's ownership and there's leadership at every level in the organization, and people feel empowered.
Yep.
And that's how you find strength and sustainability in ideas.
I love that word ownership. I think it's great. Yeah. Okay, next little topic, and we don't have to spend a ton of time on this, but the new generation. This is something that comes
Mhm.
up all the time. What have you seen as far as the new or the younger generation and their expectations coming into the career, and their expectations as to how the organization is going to take care of them, and what are those early discussions that you guys are having about how times are changing and how you can support that?
It's obviously very, very different. I would be the first one to say that I come from the suck it up generation, where all of this space that we're talking about, especially in and among the wellness space, was barely a glimmer in the eye of any professional police organization when I first started in 1993.
Mhm.
Um, where we are now is every young officer walking in the door. they have already looked at your website. They have already looked at your social media to see how in tune you are with individual wellness and with paying attention to the needs of the individual officer in a very different way than when I was brought on. It was like, okay, you're joining this team, and you're gonna do whatever they do. And you might get tired, but or you might feel sick, and like those you can't use those sick days when you're sick, kid. You've got to come in and help the team. It's very different now, and especially post pandemic, it's very different. The expectations are completely different, and so we have to adjust to that. But there's also a little bit of counterbalancing that has to take place, and the only way you can do that is by building rapport with that generation and saying, okay, recognize that you feel like you need A, B, C, and D, but how about like we help you out with A, B, and C, but you start to understand that D is really something that you need to do being here,
Mhm.
and start kind of working on that iterative process, because I think there is an adjustment that this generation needs when they come into a police organization in terms of understanding the duty that's involved. And
Mhm.
obviously that will change and modulate. Like if you bring people in who have military experience, like they're going to look at that very differently. But if you bring people in who their only experience has been like growing up in a community and going to school or going to college or playing sports, when they're walking in, like you have to kind of retune some of those priorities and have an understanding of what you need to do on behalf of the team, what you need to do on behalf of the department, and how the balance exists. Like we'll make sure we get you your time off, but don't just call in sick because you don't want to be here tomorrow. Like call in sick if you're sick.
Right.
Right. But don't just call off sick and leave it to everybody else. Like there is a team concept here. And just because you feel like you don't want to come into work today, you also have to recognize the fact that there are other people that have to elevate their burden because you're dropping your burden today.
Mhm.
And so just understanding the balance on that. And then at the same time, our supervisory and leadership level have to understand that the needs for balance have increased in this generation. And so we can't look at that with a cynical eye and just kind of trash talk it all day. We have to recognize that the needs have changed and figure out how we fit into that so that we can have a functional police department. And some of that might be just supporting and recognizing that the needs have changed. And some of it might be doing some of that counterbalance that I'm talking about, where we bring them in and say, okay, you know, this is okay. Like if you're feeling unwell and you can't be here, like that's fine. But if you're just taking the day off as a sick day because we couldn't give it to you because of staffing, that's a different thing. That's a duty question and not a wellness question. And so let's talk about the difference between the two.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we talked a little bit about why. And I think why comes up in a lot of different contexts, right? It's like when you enter into this profession, a lot of academies and agencies are saying, hey, like, remember your why, remember where you came from, remember why you got into this profession, and use that as your motivation during
Yeah.
the hard times, right? Like, think back to it. There's also this concept of wellness why that I try to incorporate is like, okay, well, you might not be feeling motivated right now to do this, but like, what is your wellness why? Why is it important for you to stay well? Is that your
Mhm.
family? Is that your team? Is that retirement? What is that? And so I find that to be really effective just in general of like, hey, like whether you're a new generation or a part of the older generation, it's like you may never feel motivated to do something. Things might be really hard, really stressful, but if you can connect to your why, then that helps you to find that motivation to
Right.
keep going and put that foot in front of the other and to show up as your best self.
Right. And so we talked a little bit about the six pillars
Mhm.
in the 21st century policing document establishes six pillars, one of those being officer safety and wellness. And we talked about the fact that like for some cops, if I just bring it up as the sixth pillar from 21st century policing, officer safety and wellness, like I'm going to turn some people off. But if I started as a conversation that has to do with the why, like, what do you think is important to your overall readiness to be a police officer.
Mhm.
And not just a police officer today, but day to day over the course of years, what's important to you, what those folks will describe to you is that sixth pillar. It is the officer safety wellness. Well, I need to be well trained so that I can take care of myself. I need to be physically trained so that I can be fit to do the job. I also need to have the balance in my life so that I can feel mentally ready to do the job. And what they're describing is the sixth pillar without you having to say, like, I need you to be beholden to the sixth pillar, right? And we do the same thing on the performance side, on the day-to-day performance. And this is, another example of kind of setting North Stars. So I established something that I call the four Ps: prepared, polished, professional, and proactive. And if you can do the first three, if you're prepared and you understand law and policy and your training, and you've done, physical training to be ready for the job, you're polished, you have, you look good in your uniform, you're physically fit, and so you fit well in your uniform. Your gear is all well tended and taken care of. You are professional. Everything that you say and do, you could put in front of that on behalf of the city of Menlo Park, and you'd be in good shape. If you can do those three things, you have my full backing and support to do the fourth, which is to be proactive, and that's what police officers love to do in this business. And I put that together because I want there to be something that people can look at that is kind of a written or represented form of that why. But I also know that if it comes from the chief, there's going to be people who are just like, they'll roll their eyes when they see that, right? And so I was having a conversation with one of our officers, and I said, and this was all during promotion time, and they were, everybody's getting ready to promote, and they're coming in, and we're doing one-on-ones. And I said, I know that some of you guys just kind of roll your eyes when I talk about the four Ps. And he just started to chuckle. And I said, let me flip it around and let me ask you, like, let's say you're out on patrol and you're making a traffic stop. Like, what's important to you to be successful on that traffic stop? And he started to describe about how important it was to make a good impression, to develop rapport with people, to leave them feeling that he was ready to do whatever needed to be done in terms of enforcement to protect himself, but also ready to receive whatever information he had to give, in terms of that, whatever that education or that lesson was, and the reason for the stop, or to gain compliance so that they could dig deeper and get into an investigation. And I said, so you just described the four Ps to me, by explaining that. And I said, the four Ps, like, I don't put the four Ps up on the wall for you because you know what you're doing. I put the four Ps up on the wall for people who are asking why.
Mm.
Saying, what is the why behind being a good police officer? Well, here are some guidelines in case you don't have that within yourself, or in case you're asking for that and nobody's able to articulate it because they're just naturally really good at it. Something that I can put on the wall for you, as a reference point.
I love that. And I was kind of laughing because I know my experiences are different than your experiences, obviously, but I know that feeling of walking in a room and having like the eye roll about something. And I
Mhm.
do think when we talk about this, because you hear the word all the time, like buy-in and, getting people to care and that, like you said, ownership of what they're doing. If people feel like it's their idea or if it comes from them, it's so much more
Mhm.
successful. And when I walk into a briefing room, like I never ever tell people this is what you should do for that reason, because people for me will roll their eyes and be like, who is this girl? And then it's like
Mhm.
brain off, not listening anymore. And so I try to lead with that same concept of like, what is important to you? Like why, like we said, why is wellness important to you? And when someone can describe that to you, then now they have that attachment to what it is, and now it's important to them, and that is that thing that they're going to lead with moving forward. So I love that
That's
concept.
right.
I think you're spot on with that.
And everyone speaks their own kind of language, right? And you can't you if you are constantly trying to put it in your own language, and trying to push ideas or initiatives, based on what you and your mind think is the right thing to say. And I've been majorly guilty of that, in the course of my
Same.
career, like lots of lessons learned, like many other, leaders in this industry. You are much less successful than if you start with questions. That concept of leading with questions, like what's important to you, how is it important to you, and even being able to say, like, ask those questions and put it up on a whiteboard
Mhm.
and say, okay, well, like, what do you think is important about being, ready to do this job? What do you think is important about being able to wind down at the end of the day? And you put those things up on the whiteboard. I guarantee you that what you're putting up on the whiteboard in a different language is exactly what you would like to impart. But now it's your team's idea and it's not your idea. And
100%.
there's a lot more stickiness to that, and there's a lot more validity to that. And that's kind of a reverse impact of the champions idea, right? You have those vocal people who will throw those ideas out there, but everybody looks at those vocal people every day in the briefing, right? And they look at those people as being influential. So if you're putting it in terms of that person's language, like, you're adding some stickiness to whatever that concept is.
100%. What is your why?
Oh, that's a great question. Um, at this point in my career, my why is very firmly leaving this industry better than I found it. In whatever way that I can. And so, what serves that for me is there's a macro and there's a micro, to that. And the macro side of that is the work that I do kind of nationally, with committees that I'm working with. I'm on a committee with IACP that actually I'm getting on the plane for that, this afternoon. And we're talking about, culture change, in the policing business as one of our key priorities. And there's also the micro and, what I'm doing with this organization and trying to leave this organization also better than I found it. And that, those are very different initiatives, but they serve the same why,
Mm.
which is, I want to come into an organization and I want, when I leave, for there to be, sustainable change that benefits the department.
Mm.
And when I came in here, I told everybody, I sat down and talked with every member of the organization, and I said, my job is to come in here and give you 5 years. Many of them had been through, 4 or 5 police chiefs in the previous 5 years. I'm going to give you 5 years so that we're not going through that constant revolution. And over the course of those 5 years, my only objective is to make you successful for the next 10 years after that,
Mm.
right? Leave it better than I found it. Leave it with some sustainability so that it can continue to grow and build and be better long after I'm gone. And that same concept works, on the wide level as well. Like what we're doing in
Mm.
the committees that I'm working on, and through ICP and also through Future Policing Institute, is we're trying to find things that are very broad strokes that will benefit the entire profession. And I'll be able to, say that I was a contributor and that I helped, a team of people who were trying to make the profession better. And so, both on the large and small scale, that's what I'm here for.
I love it. Thank you. And I love the word sustainable. I think that's like that key word of like, how can you create something now that lasts for a long time, even
Mhm.
after you're gone? Um, in the context of trying to create that culture and leaving that lasting impression, my last question for you, and this is really why I started this podcast in the first place, is what words of wisdom would you give to someone who's earlier in their career when it comes to wellness? Maybe something that you wish you would have known that would have helped you, or maybe something that you did that really truly impacted you. What words of advice would you give to anyone who's younger in their career?
I think I would say, and I do say, that you're going to find things in this business that you're going to need to take your time with. And you're going to find things in this business that you're going to have to establish the ways that it will keep you, steady and fit over time. And so, find your routines and things that will help you to be safe and healthy for your entire career and maintain those routines. And be patient about the broader concepts about how we do this business and what policing means to you and what's important for you in your career, because those things take time to develop.
Mhm.
But the good habits that you establish that will keep you as mentally and physically ready to do this job in year 30 as they will in year two, like those are habits that you can build today.
Thank you. I appreciate your time so much. I loved this conversation. It honestly went by so fast, and I feel like I could talk to you for another hour. But thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your insights. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's truly a pleasure.
Of course.